Okay, so this is just going to be a general guide on how to mulligan. It's going to go over very general things, and I'll get more specific the further I go into the PowerPoint. So to start things off, we have just some gameplays real quick, where basically I'm going to show you what I kept, and I'm going to basically explain why. Sorry I said basically so many times. I'll get better at that. You have these cards, they're all too big considering that this is going to be a fairly aggressive matchup, and just because Witch's Brew is 2 mana doesn't mean I want to keep it, because there are several better options. You saw me hover these cards right here. There are a lot of cards in this range that I would rather have in every single situation. If you go to the next slide, then you have another game where the game I played previously was against a Zoolock, so I basically said, okay, I don't want any of these. But wait a minute, it could be Zoolock, so I'm actually going to keep Lightning Breath and hope to draw a dragon, and then it ended up paying off, because the very next card I draw, you can see right here, is the Kobold Spellkin. I cut it off a little bit early, but you can just make out what that is. You can see the artwork. And it ended up paying off, and it ended up being a Zoolock, and I ended up winning the game. Then this one, I'm playing as the aggressor, which means he's a slow deck, so I want to keep something very aggressive. But also, since he's a slow deck, I can actually keep the Elder Truthseeker, because he's very, very important to my deck, and I can either coin out a 2-drop and then play him turn 5, or what ends up happening here is I play the 1-drop, I pump it turn 2, play this turn 3, and then coin out the Elder Truthseeker turn 4, and I curve out really, really nicely anyway, and these cards are super important to my deck. So when I end up drawing things like Libram of Justice or Libram of Hope, they end up paying off quite nicely. Then you have a Demon Hunter where I have 2 separate 3-drops, and I have to choose which one I like more than the other. I'm going to be the aggressor in this matchup because it's a Hunter versus Mage, so I can't keep 2 3-drops. I want to try to look for another 2-drop to up the tempo, or a 1-drop that I could potentially play. So I decided to get rid of the Scale Rider because it's not as good as the Animal Companion. And luckily I draw another 2-drop, which means I can use Zephyrus a little bit later on for more flexibility. Next, we have Warlock, and I know that the Rogue matchup generally has a wide board of small minions like lackeys, so the Nether Breath isn't really that effective here. The Dark Skies is just some of the best removal for that kind of board in the game. And then I ended up drawing Crazed Netherwing, which also helped quite a bit. And we have the last one, which is kind of long. Basically, I just show that I want to keep this 1/1 or this 1-mana card, even if I don't intend to play it turn 1. Because I can see I have this and the Og Merchant. On turn 1, I don't play either of them because I'm greedy. And it ends up paying off because I'm like, okay, well, just because I kept the card and it's a curve, it goes on curve, doesn't mean I have to play it. So I decide not to, I save it, and I was going to use it on something else, but I end up just using it on the Blazing Battle Mage and making a 2/4 and upping the tempo of this game a bit as well. So where do you want to start? Basically, where you want to start is you want to go to Hearthstone Replay. You want to go right here. Boom. You want to go Hearthstone Replay. This is not sponsored or anything. I just really, really like their site. You want to go to the Meta tab, and then go to whatever deck you're looking for and click on View Most Popular. God, wait, not Tempo Demon Hunter, just on a matter of principle. Highlander Hunter sounds good. Then you want to press the kept percentage right here, and it'll sort the most kept cards to the least kept cards. You want to always look at this kept percentage, because just because a percentage might be high doesn't mean you should always keep it. Like this Rottenest Drake, you're like, okay, this percentage is really high. Why might that be? Or Brand, why might that be? Well, just anecdotally, Rottenest Drake could do very well into Demon Hunter. You play this in response to him playing the Glavebound Adept, you're able to kill it, and then you have a 6/5 on the board, and you can swing for a lot of tempo. Dino Tamer Bran. If you're into a slow deck like Priest or Mage, you keep it more frequently. Those are the matchups you keep it into. And so you win more because you're able to get an 8/8 charge on the board. So you don't want to always look at these, because if you do, you might see cards up here that aren't usually kept, 17% and 18%. So it's nice to look at it side by side, but you don't want this to be your deciding factor. Then as you go on, what do you want to do if you are the tempo matchup? Basically, if you are tempo, you want to try to keep the tempo options. You want to curve out really nicely with a 1-drop, a 2-drop, and a 3-drop. However, not all of these things are made at the same power level. especially 3-drops, but also 2-drops. The 2-drops are a little bit different because if you are an aggro deck, that's like a really, really nice curve point, because not only can you play one turn 2, but you can also play a 2-drop in hero power on turn 4 if needed, so it's a little bit different, but the point is turn 3 is a big one. And if you look here, the percentages really drop off. You have the 2 top tier 3-cost cards, then you have Animal Companion, which is up there close with them, and I'd say that this order makes sense if you have all 3 of these things, or if, let's say you have an opening hand with Zixer, Animal Companion, and Diving Griffin. I would probably keep Zixer and dump the other 2, Desert Spear and Diving Griffin, because they're not as good, right? Like, the Desert Spear is kept a decent chunk of the time. It's not a bad card, but I wouldn't keep it over some of these other 3-drops, and I don't want to have too many 3-drops in my hand. Also, I just know this because I play Highlander Hunter a lot, but the 3-cost pool is like one of the biggest in your deck, 3s and 2s. So if you do get rid of one extra 3-drop, by the time you get to turn 3 or 4, you'll probably draw another one anyway, and it'll be fine. For 2-drops, the same thing applies. You have things up here that are like really, really good, like the Imprisoned Felmaw, Phase Stalker, and Fairy Dragon, which are some of the most, like, 3 of the 4 most kept cards in your deck. But then you have other ones, like Corrosive Breath, which is kept 50% of the time. It's situational. And then Freezing Trap, which you try to not keep. If you are the control in the matchup, then into aggro, you want to keep things that'll keep you alive. You want to play things that, yeah, will keep you alive or give you tempo on the board. Another card that I might have wanted to keep in here was the Bomb Wrangler, the 2/3 for 3, because sometimes you just gotta play it to have tempo on the board to keep yourself from taking as much damage, so that way you might be able to get to some of your later win conditions. If you don't have any of these cards in your hand, but you have a board wipe, I would keep the board wipe. If you have some early tempo and a board wipe, I'd get rid of the board wipe because you don't need both, and I would prefer to have the cards on board, but the one big board wipe on, say, like turn 5 is a good alternative. And as you can see, the win rates here, 54, 56%, those are relatively high, or at least yellow means average, but they're only kept a small portion of the time, and that's because they're kept into very certain matchups, right? Now, don't let this make you upset with the Rolling Fireball being low. That's because you keep it into matchups that are already bad, which means that there's an underlying variable where if you didn't keep the Rolling Fireball, your win rate would probably be even lower than this, because you would have no way of dealing with, say, a Demon Hunter's wide board of the 4/2, and then a 2/2, and then whatever other minions they have on the board, right? So you just have to base it on what you think you'll need come some of the swing turns. If you're a control into another slow matchup, you can keep slower options because they're your win conditions. A great example of this is Dragoncaster and Mage. You don't want to keep this into aggro. If you keep this into aggro, you will die before you get to turn 6. You need a hard mulligan for better things. But if you're into a slower matchup, say like Priest or another Mage or a Quest Warlock, you can keep this Dragoncaster without a problem at all, because you're more likely to get to this late game win condition, which will help you win the game. It's in the name. It's a win condition of yours, and since you don't have to like fight to survive tooth and nail, since you're very comfortably going to get there, you just keep it. Imagine playing Dragoncaster in Box or Dragoncaster in Power Creation on turn 6 and upping the tempo into a Priest, and they might not have a great response for it. Same thing goes with Galakron. Assuming it's a slower matchup like a Priest or something, just imagine being able to guaranteed play on turn 7 for 2 or maybe even 4 free cards. Or just knowing it's in your hand and you can play it whenever you want once you fully invoke it. Just like having that security, especially into a slower matchup where you aren't fearing for your gosh darn life, it can be very, very, very helpful to have some of these late game win conditions. There are 2 more rules. There are 2 more basic rules in my opinion. One of them is don't settle. I'll talk about Diving Griffin in a second because there are situations in which you do actually want to keep it. And I should have included it on my next slide, but I forgot about it actually. But just because, say you have a 1-drop and then Chaos Strike and Frozen Shadow Weaver, just because these cards they curve out, doesn't mean you should keep them. I would much rather mulligan and try to find a better 2-drop or even a 1-cost minion and a hero power than have the Chaos Strike turn 2, even though it's a 2-cost card. It's not even kept 50% of the time. The darker the color, the worse it is win rate wise comparatively. This is a fairly dark orange, which means that it's not that great of a card to keep. Frozen Shadow Weaver, I will admit, sometimes can be good into Demon Hunter if you want to freeze their face, but most of the time they're better options. You'll draw into the other 3-drop, the 4/2, or you'll draw into some other things that will allow you to continually hero power. Say you'll draw another 2-drop or another 1-drop, so you have more tempo on the board, which can be very, very helpful. Don't get baited just because it curves out. They're not always good. I will admit, Frozen Shadow Weaver surprised me a little bit that it was so low and not very good, but knowing this now, I'm like, okay, maybe I don't prioritize it. And just so we're clear, I use Hearthstone Replay all the time. I have a second monitor. I know not all people do, but even when I didn't, I would Alt-Tab on my laptop when I had that piece of junk. I would Alt-Tab just to make sure what I was keeping was good, right? Like if I was confused and I was like, should I keep this card or not? Should I keep the Shadowed or the Frozen Shadow Weaver or not? And I see this and I'm like, okay, I'll get rid of it and see if I can draw something better, and it just helped me. And then the other rule is pretty much always keep Zephyrus. If you looked back here, if you looked back here, Zephyrus was only kept 67% of the time. I can be honest, Zephyrus is the most flexible card in the game. I would keep him in almost every situation. He's great early game to help you deal with minions if you need to, if you're playing into aggro. He is great with developing a board. Say you don't have a 3-drop in hand, you got unlucky, it can generate you 1 if you want to play it turn 2. And it can be a late game win condition. I am never not happy having Zephyrus in my hand. I would almost always keep him. Then the last thing is learning with experience. This kind of goes hand in hand, oh my gosh, with the Diving Griffin. Diving Griffin, there are situations in which you keep it. I absolutely love keeping it into Demon Hunter. You might be wondering, why would you want to do that? Well, the 6/4 Glavebound Adept that does 4 damage to your face, that's totally balanced, by the way, only has 4 health, which means that you're very easily able to kill it with a 3-drop. And usually he plays it turn 6 because he hero powers hits and then plays the Glavebound Adept, and you're able to kill a 6-mana play, roughly, with a 3-mana play, and then you're able to play a minion on your own right after that. Demon Hunter is still a bad matchup for you, but this could make it a little more winnable. And this is probably why the win rate when it's kept is low, because you're keeping it into a bad matchup, which means you're probably going to lose regardless. This just gives you the best chance to survive. The same thing goes for Scale Rider, in my opinion. I absolutely love this card, being able to just ping off the 4/2 with Demon Hunter, along with some other cards, say into like Hunter or something like that. It can be very, very helpful, although this card I really only keep into Demon Hunter because I've seen how useful it can be. And based on this experience, you'll learn to keep certain things and not keep certain things, and it's all built on the base that you learned from this video and looking at Hearthstone replays mulligan just percentages and using that as a base, and eventually realizing things like, okay, I can see Frozen Shadow Weaver being good into Demon Hunter because of the freeze. Let's try it out. And then if you have success with it a couple of times, you can make a mental note of that in the future. But Hearthstone Replay is a very, very good general guide. This was also a very good general guide for those specific situations where the table isn't enough for you. And I hope you guys enjoyed. If I missed anything or I was confusing in any way, please let me know in the comments. I will try to explain anything to the best of my abilities. I am very tired when I'm making this. It is like 3:30 in the AM. I need to go to sleep. But I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one.